Hey, YouTube world, we are back, and it is a fantabulous weekend full of fantabulous sports, so I hope you're having a fantabulous time here. Checking in with us real quick. Jamal Adams is on his way to the Seattle Seahawks, and the details of the deal, for those who may not be aware, in exchange for Jamal Adams and a 4th-round pick going back to the Seahawks are the next 2 first-round picks for the Seahawks, a 3rd-round pick, and safety Bradley McDougall headed towards the Jets. This deal feels like, and if you look at the details, that it's just one of those situations where it was a deal the Jets simply could not refuse. Being given that offer, the Seahawks put them in a position where they offered a deal they couldn't refuse. The Jets take the deal, and they move on from a disgruntled star they would have been forced to move on from after the 2021 season, if they'd felt that was the best time to get the best offer, which is what it was shaping up to be. But then the Seahawks, for whatever reason the Seahawks had, came forward and said, look, we're going to make this deal happen, and we're going to make it happen now, because we want this guy for 2020 and 2021. And so what we see is the Seahawks met the offer of what the Jets were focused on. I guess 2 first-round picks was a pretty big deal breaker there, plus adding a corner like McDougall is certainly going to help the Jets in some way, shape, or form. It was the same thing the Seahawks did last year to incentivize a Jadeveon Clowney trade, was to add Barkevious Mingo going the other way along with another linebacker and a 3rd-round pick. So much like that deal and much like the Laramie Tunsil deal, when the Dolphins sent Tunsil to Houston for 2 first-round picks, it was simply a deal that the Jets could not refuse. And the thing that was most surprising is that the Seahawks gave up more than the Bears did for Khalil Mack. And that deal turned out to be horrible for the Bears. If you look at hindsight, how the Raiders went into rebuild and restarted everything with that organization. In a same light, they got more than the Jaguars did for Jalen Ramsey, and more than the Browns gave up for Odell Beckham. Like, it was a haul that the Jets got, and that was the incentive that made them decide Jamal Adams is worth moving on from. Now, to be fair, Jamal Adams is the best at what he does, and is young and was cheap at the time. So was Jalen Ramsey, so was Khalil Mack. So you would think they would have similar type of deals, despite the fact they play different positions, all on defense, but all with different values in terms of roster construction. But the Jets still got the deal done, and they got the similar offers to what those guys were getting. And Tunsil can be thrown in there too, because he was a rookie, a Pro Bowl. Maybe wasn't the best left tackle in the league, but was certainly a great left tackle in the league, and a great young left tackle in the league. One that's more difficult to acquire. I know the Raiders got one with Trent Brown via free agency, but those guys don't become available that often, and so their price tag goes way up in those circumstances, and the Seahawks had to make a deal that they could not refuse. They did, and so they get their guy. What's interesting from the Seahawks' vantage point is that it looks as if they're not going to give Jamal Adams a contract extension, or whether Adams wants one or not is another question. It looks like they're going to play out these next 2 years without making a long-term commitment. An interesting tactic, because yes, Adams is obviously going to want an extension. If he's willing to ride it out until free agency, well, then the Seahawks can potentially use the franchise tag option. And that franchise tag could potentially keep Adams there for 3 seasons, or they can flip Jamal Adams after the fact for more value and get some of those assets back. The Seahawks are in that interesting position where, yes, you need young assets to compete, but something that's been a big factor for them is obviously having Russell Wilson. They're one of those few exceptions where you have an elite quarterback that year after year is going to help you get to 9 wins in the season. They'll stay around that number. So this is a whole nother situation where not only do you have someone who's one of the best at their positions on offense, but now you have a guy that anchors your defense really two guys, because Bobby Wagner and Jamal Adams, like the Rams, they're two guys that anchor down that defense. So the way I look at the difference between the Seahawks and the Rams is that the Seahawks have a good offense and the Rams don't have a good offense. Like, that's the biggest difference between the two. So, fascinatingly enough, the Seahawks are going to take however much they get with Jamal Adams, whatever these 2 seasons look like for them, and maybe be content without even giving Jamal Adams a contract extension, which again, the Rams are trying to figure that out right now with Jalen Ramsey, where they got 2 years with him and then had to decide what they wanted to do in terms of giving him a contract extension, which they still haven't come to that conclusion yet. Maybe it's a franchise tag for Ramsey. Maybe it's the following season, or after this season ends, Ramsey gets a big contract extension. Maybe Ramsey hits free agency, or maybe they tag and trade, whatever it may be. That same situation is going to come up with Jamal Adams a year later. So that's where everything goes down from the Seahawks side. Again, on the on-field product, Jamal Adams makes them better. I don't know if it makes them better than the 49ers, but it certainly helps the Seahawks. And that NFC is so even that it could go in favor of the Seahawks. It could not. It's all these different circumstances that have to be played out. But still, this is big-time news, and the Jets got an offer they couldn't refuse. And that's the big takeaway you can have from this trade today. Over the course of the next few months, we'll see how things progress, and we can talk more about the on-field implications of getting not just a safety, but a true linebacker, guy who was top 10 in tackles for loss and sacks among linebackers last year. So this pseudo linebacker safety doing fantastic things for the Jets will now be doing fantastic things for the Seattle Seahawks.